Hello, Lizzie here. Today I'm going to show you how to make Oh So Spooky, which is the most perfect wreath to go on your door for the next 2 or 3 months, starting from about September, October, November, December. And then you can swap it with the Christmas one. But Oh So Spooky is all about Halloween. We've got the most amazing little characters for you to create. A little bit of stitching, not much, and then creating this beautiful wreath. Now the wreath itself is made up of a wraparound garland of leaves, incredibly easy. You can stick extra on if you want to. I've got some pine cones to put on today on the second one I'm going to make, but this is definitely going to be going on my front door. So in Oh So Spooky we have a gorgeous little ghostie, which I think he's up here, look, you can see him peeking through. We've got a witch's hat, which is up here. We'll see these in closer detail in a sec. We've got a pussycat, a black pussycat down here. We've got little pumpkins that I've got from my local store. And what's the last one? Oh yeah, a pumpkin, a little pumpkin there. So can you see, with a face on. And actually there's an additional one which I didn't use at all, which I'll talk about in a sec. So Oh So Spooky is made up of all those little elements of characters, and you can put on as many as you want. You could make the whole wreath with little ghosts or a whole wreath with the little pumpkins. It depends on how much stitching you want to do. They're super easy to make. I'm going to show you how I make them. You can make them the way that's easiest for you, but I'll show you how I make them, which actually I think is probably a very easy way and quite accurate. And we'll put another wreath together so you can see what it looks like. So I'm going to put this on the back of my shelf here so you can admire from a distance. There we go. And we're using a hot glue gun on this occasion. Now I will give you links to my Amazon shop where things like the glue gun and the heat and bond or the bond-wed steam machine, that type of thing is available. The only other thing I've used, which I haven't got in my shop yet, is a light box, but you can always use a window, it's no bother. So if we look on the overhead, let's just have a look at the characters. So we've got the witch's hat, and I've used a little sort of embroidery design on my machine to create little stars. So that's up to you, you don't have to do that. I just thought it'd be quite fun to add a little bit of detail. We've got the pussycat, and depending on how you draw and position these, you can get a right and a wrong. So, a right and a wrong, a right and a left. So you can have the pussycat facing one particular way or the other. So it does depend. You can see that's the back of it. And in actual fact, that's exactly how you would do it. You would actually machine embroider the eyes from the other side. You've then got the pumpkin, which is this one here, and he's just adorable. He's got a really lovely cheery face with a little tiny stalk there. So you can either, I've done a plique there with Bondaweb, but you could use your embroidery threads to do a little stalk there. And then of course we've got the ghostie, which is this one here, and I just think he's absolutely gorgeous. The fifth one, which I haven't used because I don't know why I didn't use it, is a bat. So you could make a bat as well, and I put a couple of eyes in there as well. So the pattern includes all of these things for you to have a little go at. So this is what we're going to create. We're going to create the ghost today, and all of the little characters are created absolutely identically. So I thought, well, we'll do the ghosts because I need to make more of them for my wreath that I'm going to make today. And then you just do exactly the same for all of the others. So it's pretty sort of simplistic in that respect. But what we're doing on the hat is we're using, as I said, a star embroidery design, but you could do this by hand just to add a little bit of detail. For the eyes on the cat, I've found a little sort of triangle, and I've embroidered that with my machine. But of course, again, you could do by hand. You can do French knots if you wanted to. All this is applique, which I haven't worried about stitching because this is just a wreath. It's not something that's going to go through the wash, so I'm happy with just leaving it as is. And of course we've got the eyes for the little ghosty. So, and again, I haven't stitched that. You know, I could have stitched this before I layered all this together, but I just figured, well, we're not going to put it in the wash, so I'm happy with it just as it is. Yeah, there's only so much sometimes you need to do. So those are the 5 characters that you've got. Like I said, we're making Ghost today, so you can see how that's done. So the first thing you need to do is, I've got, as I say, I've got my light box here, and it'll make the rest of the screen go a little bit dark now because this is actually really bright. I've got it on full power. So what you're going to do is that you're going to lay your paper pattern over the top, and you're going to get your fabric of choice. Now I'm using white because we're making ghosts. If you use black, then you can still see through, but you would need to mark with a chalk. Okay, you'd need to mark with a chalk so you can see the lines when you go to stitch. So to make the little ghosty, I'll just turn that round so it's nearer to me. What we can do is we need, I would say you need minimum of 4, probably 5 or 6. So I would suggest you get a piece of fabric, this is about 9 inches square, that will take all of your ghosts in one go. And as long as you've got a little bit of space between each one for the zigzag, for the satin stitch and for cutting around, then you're good to go. So if we were to lay this over the top, just get our heat erasable pen, and we're just going to draw around. Now you don't have to use a heat erasable pen. This is on the right side of the fabric, by the way. This is on the right side of the fabric facing me. But all I would say to you is, if you use a regular pencil or a regular pen, you know, that you write with, you are going to perhaps see those lines underneath your satin stitch. So you just need to be aware of that. Now I go in little strokes around curves, just so I get a nice smooth curve going round. And there is our first ghost created, and I just do a little cross for his eyes so I know roughly where they're going to go. So then what we can do is actually we can move our fabric, so we can move it so it's sort of, so she's positioned there. She's suddenly become a she. Sorry, my light box is temperamental. Switches itself off with no reason at all. And you can just keep on drawing them onto your fabric. You know, this is great for scrap busting. I'm using a white on white fabric which has a sort of a swirly leaf design, and it's perfect for a ghost. I wouldn't use plain white, not especially, well, no, that's going to be up to you, but I quite like to have the white on white for the ghost. But again, if you find a nice fabric for the pumpkins, I've kept mine plain, but you might find a nice lightly patterned one. You don't want anything that's too heavily patterned. So already we've got 2 ghosts on our fabric there. Let me move the light box out of the way. I'll switch it off, and let me just move that. So we've got 2 ghosts now on our fabric. You may not see them in huge detail because obviously they are lightly drawn on. And then what you need to do is get the same size in wadding and the same size in a backing fabric. So I've used the same fabric for my top and my bottom, right side facing out, so it's already good to go. I've got 2 pieces of wadding and lots of other bits, 2 pieces of wadding in my layers, and that goes down. So we've just used a temporary spray to hold that down, and then my other piece of fabric, my second piece of fabric, on the top. So right side facing out, 2 layers of wadding to give a nice little puffy little character. You know, he's lovely and squidgy. And then the same fabric facing out, right sides out, with our characters on. And those are then, well, lovely and drawn, ready for stitching. I have to say, it's a really nice, it's what I would call a Sunday afternoon project, because it's a nice repetitive design. You're going to love making all the bits and pieces, all the different characters, and make as many as you need. The next thing we're going to do is transfer the eyes of the ghost onto our heat and bond, bonder web, that type of thing. Now if I bring my A4 sheet back in again, I won't have the light box this time, and we just look at it here. So I want to transfer those two ovals, and if you have a look at the heat and bond, if you get right in there and look at the heat and bond, you can see those lines perfectly well. So you don't really need a light box for it. So I'm going to actually move it into the corner. And just again, I'm using a regular pen because this is on the paper side of my heat and bond, and I'm really not bothered about the fact that I'm using a regular pen. We're not going to use this part. This part will be just waste paper. So there's my two little eyes transferred, and then all we need to do is attach the heat and bond to my black piece of fabric. And obviously you're going to make a lot of these at one time, and this little tiny piece of heat and bond is plenty enough for all of the ghosts that you might make. You know, you can move all these little ovals around. So all I'm going to do is iron that heat and bond on. It only takes a few seconds to adhere that, and I would leave that to sort of cool down. Let's move the mat out the way. I'll just leave it to cool down, and we'll cut it down to size, and this will go on almost at the very last thing. We'll come back to this when we've stitched our little ghosts, because if you think about it, I've done heat erasable pen on my eyes, but also I've done heat erasable pen on my ghost. So if I stuck those down now, I would lose all my lines here, which would be a shame. So what we're going to do is we're going to free motion through all of the layers around our shape. That is literally to hold all the layers together to allow me then to go in and satin stitch. I probably wouldn't satin stitch straight away. I would like to lay those layers down. Because we're going to cover up with satin stitch, you could do this with your regular foot. Obviously with Ghosty, he's a little bit curvy, so you will have to move your foot regularly and your needle and reposition regularly if you don't use free motion, but it's possible to do. So if you move all our bits out of the way and bring the machine in. Now the other thing you can do is, if you haven't got any sort of adhesive spray, you could take a pin and pin these layers together, and I show that in the pattern. You want to make sure that your pins are nowhere near where your needle or your foot is going to go. You don't want to interfere with your stitching. So just as an example, you can just go round like this. Once you've free motioned these little creatures, then you can take the pins out because it's all caught in the layers. But it's a good alternative to gluing your pieces down. Okay. So my machine is set up for free motion. You know what that means. We don't need to worry about a stitch length. Drop your feed dogs if you have that facility. If you don't have that facility of dropping your feed dogs, then please just put your stitch length on 0. It'll be absolutely fine. And you're going to move the fabric. Now please don't be afraid of free motion. Just have a little practice before you get going on anything, because you need to be able to move your fabric around easily. So drop your feed dogs. If you can't do that, put your stitch length on 0. You do need an embroidery foot, a darning foot. That's what you're after, free motion foot. There's so many different ways of describing the same foot. Some manufacturers will say free motion foot, others will say darning embroidery foot. So look out for that, and do get the one that goes with your machine. So if you've got a Janome, get a Janome one. I've got a Juki one. So please do that. I wouldn't recommend getting a generic one. That's just my opinion. Okay. Okay, so we'll put our foot down, which kind of clamps the fabric, but I can still move the fabric around. It's still very loose under my foot. And then we're just going to go for it. We're just going to literally follow the lines. And move your fabric. If you find it, I'm just going to move it a little bit more towards me. If you think you need to move your fabric, move it. The purists who do a lot of free motion perhaps would say you don't need to adjust your needle. But if you haven't done this before, then do stop and adjust. Okay, so the other thing I would highly recommend is never to use your stop-start facility. Dig that foot control out of the box or the drawer or wherever you store it and attach your foot control. If it's something that you can't do without, in other words you have a mobility issue, then put it on the slowest speed you possibly can have, because you'll notice I need two hands here to try and keep my work under control. The alternative, which is a really useful thing to do, is to use a hoop and hoop this up. So obviously you'd need more fabric, but hoop it up, and then if you've only got the use of one hand, then the hoop will make light work of it. It really will. So just trimming my threads there. So I've gone round one, if we look on the overhead, I've gone round one little ghostie. So he's attached, so he's gone through all of the layers. So you can see on the back, he looks fab. And we'll do two, just so when I repeat, it's you know, you've got the information then. So you're just moving the fabric gently. I keep my speed consistent and just follow the lines. I'm going backwards now, but obviously if that's not, and I'll always stop if I need to readjust. I don't try to do that as I'm going along, because that's where you end up with a jaggedy stitch. So I'll stop and readjust. Yeah, so the idea is that you should be able to go north, south, east, west with your stitching, up, in other words, backwards, forwards. My pin has just got caught on my foot there, so I'm going to just take that out without having to pivot and turn. But goodness me, if you want to pivot and turn, you pivot and turn. And please have a go. If you feel that the free motion part is too scary, then go straight onto the satin stitch. But I like the fact that it's all stitched down in place. For me, it's just a very visual way of following. Okay, so that's our second little ghostie done. So let me show you on the overhead there. You can see quite clearly. Now, because I've stitched white on white, I'm not going to remove my blue drawn lines yet. I'm still going to use that as a visual guide for me. You'll find that probably incredibly helpful if your site's not what it used to be, like mine, because you've still got the blue line and your stitch line to follow when it comes to the free motion. Okay, so now all we need to do is the satin stitch. So I'm just going to go ahead and change my foot. So I've changed the foot on my machine now, and in actual fact I have got my open toe foot. It's actually for applique work, for doing sort of satin stitch, that type of work where you can see exactly what you're doing, and it doesn't flatten your work as you're going through. I'm not bothered about the flattening side of my work, but I do want to be able to see. Let me show you that foot. So let me put that on my overhead there. So that's what the foot looks like that I'm using. So as the needle goes in the centre there, I can see, sort of looking in that way, I can see everything. So if I was to put that on the line of my work, then you can see that I can still see the blue line quite easily of my little ghostie there, rather than using a closed toe. So something that would, your sort of regular foot like that, I'm not going to be able to see very well where I'm going. So if you've got one of these type of feet, I mean, anything will do. It doesn't have to necessarily be the one for satin stitch or applique. Though you might have another one in your stash that is very similar. That's an ideal one to use. So let's pop that back on the machine. Okay, so I've set my machine up now for a satin stitch. It's not that close a stitch together. So my stitch width is on 3. And my stitch length is 0.7, but if you get to 6, 5 or 8, you know, in that sort of range, you're about right. If you come down to a stitch length of 0.5, then it will be much more like a satin stitch, but that's up to you. It just takes that little bit longer to stitch. And there is a bit of a technique to this, so I'll talk you through it as I start. So obviously we're not doing free motion anymore, so I've lifted my feed dogs up, so go and do that before you start your satin stitch. We're literally going to follow the line around. Now, if you're going around a curve that's convex, if it's convex, in other words it sticks out, you're going to pivot your needle on the outside and move it so the stitch comes in. If you've got a curve that's concave, in other words it's going in, the other way, going in, so you're stitching into that curve, then you're going to stop and pivot with your needle on the left hand side, on the what I call the inside of your work. Okay, so that's the only thing that I would say to you is that you need to learn. That way you'll get your satin stitch looking really neat and tidy, and I think only practice will make that perfect for you. Also, although these are little projects and really super cute, there's actually quite a lot of little technique-y type things that you'll learn by doing this. So if we start, so I'm just going to start on not a particularly good big curve, so I'm just going to follow, literally following the line, and if I need to stop and pivot I absolutely will. This is not free motion now. So on the sweeping curve of the underbody, if you like, of our ghost, it's a nice long curve, so I don't need to really pivot and turn my work. And you should be able to, if you go a nice slow pace, like I'm doing, you should be able to move your work around fairly easily without pivoting. So just coming up to the underarm now. So this is where we need to concentrate on where we pivot and when we turn. Okay, so we've got a concave curve, so the curve is going in. So when you look at the arm, you're coming up and you're going into that curve. So you need to pivot on the inside. So if your needle is on the outside of your work, then you need to make it come into the middle, the inside. I knew I'd get myself in a muddle on that. So your needle is now on the left hand side. So I'm going to keep my needle in, I'm going to pivot my work a little bit, and then I will easily work around those curves. So I'll do 2 stitches and I'll pivot on the inside. So you can see I'm doing this really slowly. If you come off your line a little bit, don't worry. Just follow it round. So 1 stitch to the out, 1 stitch to the inside, the right or the left. Perhaps I'll start saying that so you're not confused. And then you're coming round to the hand, let's say. So this time we're going to finish on the right hand side. Pivot, 2 stitches, so it's back on the right. Move, move. Sometimes you may not need to move, but it's just 2 stitches. So in, out, left or right, but you're always ending up on the right hand side. And there might come a time when 4 stitches are okay, but then when we get on a little straight bit, we can just carry on. So now we're coming up to just under his neck, so this time it's a concave, it's going in, so I'm going to pivot on the left. Needle down on the left, pivot, right, then left, right, left, pivot, right, left, pivot, and then I've got a bit of a straight run. Don't aim to be absolute perfection on the line, just try and cover up your stitches, that's all you're trying to do. So now we're coming up into a really tight concave shape, curve, so again we're pivoting on the left only. So it's 2 stitches to go right, back to left. All of this keeps the outside edge really neat. If you do it the other way around, you'll find that you have great big gaps in your stitching, which is okay. I mean, gosh, you have to remember what we're creating here. So now we're coming out onto a concave, so we're going to pivot on the right. So 2, maybe 4 stitches. This is 4 really. Always finish on the right. And just keep pivoting, and then you're just following the curve of the head round. Try and make sure that your fabric stays flat. And again, you should be able to move that fabric around fairly quickly. We're just coming to the top of the left arm again. So this time we've got a concave, so we're pivoting on the left. Just 2 stitches will take you round that curve nicely. And then top of the arm. Just cut that thread in case we get it tangled up. We're coming up to the outside of his left arm now, so because it's on the concave, we're going to be pivoting on the right. If you've ever seen a buttonhole that has a rounded end, you'll be looking for them now. You'll notice that this is the same kind of procedure, that the inside of the curve is very tight, but the outside is a nicely spaced satin stitch, and that's because they've pivoted on the correct side. Right, so just going around his left side now. So we've got a little bit of a concave curve here. So because it's concave, we're pivoting on the left hand side of our needle. 2 or 4 stitches. But you don't want to finish on the right. I think a lot of this is going to be practice. By the time you've made 4 or 5 of these, you'll be a pro. You could teach it to the local sewing group maybe. Okay. So we're back to where we started, and now I'm just going to cut my thread. So if we look on the overhead, it always looks a bit scruffy until you've actually ironed away the blue line. But that is now a perfectly satin stitch little ghostie. So we'll quickly do this other one. I'll do this and come back to you, and then we'll iron all this away and attach his eyes to the little ghosties there. So now I have created my two little ghosties there. I haven't ironed anything yet, and I've now got two pairs of eyes for my two little ghosts. So all I need to do now is to cut out the eyes, and I would go right up to the line at this point. You can use the scrappiest pieces of paper for this, pieces of Bondaweb or Heat and Bond, whatever you decide to use. I think we all have our favourites, don't we? These are quite small pieces, so if you have dexterity problems, then you might want to just use your machine and embroider them. But I'll leave that for you to decide. If you do embroidery, you want to do that before all your layers are put together. So there's two, and then let's cut the other two eyes out. And also if you've got tweezers, that always helps as well, because they are such small little pieces. And we'll just cut these. Now I find with Heat and Bond, the paper comes off the back far more easily than anything else that I use. I think Steamer Seam is my second favourite, because that's sticky, which holds everything together. So those are my pieces cut. Let's just separate them from the paper. Like I say, this is I find this much easier than Heat and Bond. So I've got my X marks the spot on my little ghosties here. So I'll just pop those over the top. If you want your ghosts to face the other way, then just flip your paper over from the pattern, or you could draw this on the back, put this on the back of the ghost. So let me just explain that a little bit better than I have done. So if I flip this over, you'll see that the ghost is facing the other way. So if we look at it again, if we look at this bit, the sort of top part of his head, the little sort of curve there faces to the left. If we turn it that way, the little curve faces to the right. So we could, if we wanted to, and why not, just trim your threads, because your the wrong side will always look a little bit more scruffy because of your thread cutting. So we'll have one on the back and one on the front. It shouldn't make any difference. Obviously you might want to just mark your eyes on the back as well. So let's just heat those down. Okay, so they're nicely stuck, and obviously, like I said, you'll need to trim some of your threads. So we'll cut one out one way, and we'll cut one out on the opposite way. It just gives you an idea of how you can reverse them. So don't forget, we've done this one here, so we want to do this one here, which is this one. Let's turn him the right way around. So we'll put his eyes on. We've got the X's on this side, so we know exactly where to put them. But you'll soon realise what you need to do and how you need to position everything. It's like everything, isn't it? It's practice. Okay, so he does look cute. So we've got his eyes on. So when we heat this, we're going to take all the blue away, which is perfect. And it makes a huge difference to your work. So let's just pop the heat over the back of this one as well. Oh, he looks so cute. It's amazing when you iron them and take the lines away, how much cuter they look. And obviously we've got this one on this side. I'll just make sure his eyes are well stuck. Give him a little press. So you can see we can get quite a few on this small piece of fabric. We'll probably get at least 6. So it's very frugal. So now we need to cut these out. Now I don't want you to cut right up to your satin stitch. You might be really tempted to do that. But I want you to cut about a 1/16 of an inch away initially. You may then want to go back and trim a little closer, but on the first run, if you like, I want you to trim about 16 inches away, 1/16 of an inch away, not 16 inches, that would be enormous. And so you're just following your stitches and you're not going anywhere near them, because it would be very inconvenient if you snipped the edges of your stitches. That would be really annoying. And you end up with a really puffy little character. He's almost like, if you wanted to make fabric badges, you know, if you did some embroidery, 2 layers of wadding is perfect. I've used 80/20, but I'm sure if you used a polyester you would get the same effect. Just use your offcuts. And when I first started making, especially the little ghosts, I cut out 5-inch squares of my fabric and my wadding because that was convenient for me, and also he fitted in quite nicely. And I thought, hold on, that's wasting a lot of fabric. So although I started off thinking this would be ideal, actually, for a more cost-effective way, you just use your scraps. And as a bonus, I'm including some Christmas designs, holiday. So if you don't like the Halloween, if it's not your thing, or if you think it'll date quite quickly, which of course it will, then I've put some holiday ones in there as well. So that's our first little ghostie. So let's just quickly cut out the second one, because I want to put this on my wreath. And a nice sharp little pair of scissors is perfect for this. You just want to get into those curves, but like I say, just keep away from the edge of your stitching. The other thing to remember is that you've used a white wadding. So when you come to do, for instance, the cat or the hat or the pumpkin, you're obviously going to see a little bit of white. Now, I'm okay with that, but you may not be. So just find yourself a colour felt tip pen or crayon or something, paint, whatever, acrylic paint would do. And just colour in around there, if that upsets you too much. I know some folk won't mind, and I know some folk will. So just use I would just use a felt tip pen, child's pen, and colour those edges in. But I don't mind about it. You have to always try to remember what you're making. Is it worth spending huge amounts of time on it? If you were going to make these for a craft store, then obviously you want them to be absolutely beautiful, so maybe you would think about colouring them in. You also might think about cutting the shapes out and satin stitching over the edge of your designs, but I found this a far more quicker way, more efficient and easier to manage. So there we are. So we've got 4 little ghosts, 2 little pussycats, a hat, oh hold on, we've got 2 hats, and we've got 3 pumpkins. So that's plenty now to make our wreath with. So let's crack on with that. Now all of these things you can get at your local store, your crafting store. So I'm going to use a hot glue gun. To wait for it to heat up. I forgot about that bit. So it's literally, I found this type of wreath to be perfect. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to tuck the end in there, So just to secure that. And then I've got a garland. I think it's about 3 meters long. I'll give you the link to my Amazon shop where I purchased it from. When you wrap this around, try not to catch all the leaves, any of the leaves. Try and make sure that your leaves stay loose, if you like. And you're literally just wrapping it around. And a lot of these garlands can be bought, they're fairly inexpensive. And if you don't secure the garland, the leaves, you could remove them and put more sort of perhaps seasonal one maybe for the autumn or the spring or the winter months, or whenever you feel that you like a wreath for your front door. They're just lovely. So all you're trying to do is eke out the garland. Well, I suppose they're about 3 inches apart. And you can always move them once you've got it in place, so you can see how effective that looks. And then we've come back to the beginning. So we just want to secure that end into the wreath. And this time I'm just poking it through. The ends are just poked through. I don't want to secure them necessarily. So in a warm room, all of these leaves will start to flatten out and become absolutely gorgeous. Okay, and then you can fiddle with it. Okay, so there's my wreath ready to go. I've got 3 little pumpkins to go on the bottom here. I've got some pine cones that I can put on as well. I've also got spare leaves, so you might be able to find yourself some spare leaves. Certainly the link I'll give you to my Amazon shop. This one has the spare leaves that come with it. So there's two things here that I'm using. Firstly, the garland of leaves, and then the second thing is it's like a little kit with the pine cones. There's acorns, there's leaves, and there's pumpkins. But obviously, you know, your local hobby store should have all of these things. So we know that this is the top. We know that's where we finished. It's a lot fuller there. So I'm going to put my pumpkins right at the bottom here, and you move your leaves out of the way so you've got space to actually pop your pumpkins down. Now I'm just going to put liberal amounts of hot glue on my wreath to actually stick my pumpkins down. Now you might want to, again, put loads on the bottom of your pumpkins as well. So be warned that you're going to use a little bit more hot glue than perhaps you would have thought. You want them to be secure, so you can see how that looks. Hold it in place until it's set. It shouldn't take too long. And then we'll just move that leaf there. I'm going to sit that down for a moment. Just hold it there. And then I'm going to put more on the base of this pumpkin here. Oops, nearly. And pop that. Just move the leaves, because you don't really want to catch the leaves, because they're the sort of the main players, if you like. Just hold those down, and then put some more hot glue on the base of this one. So be liberal with your hot glue. And pop that one there. And just wait for them to set. It might take a moment, because obviously what you're doing is that you're pushing them down into little twigs. So just hold those in place. I think we're fine with that. If they are a little bit wriggly, that's not too bad. It perhaps needs a bit more glue. Just make sure they're in the right place before you start. They look really lovely, don't they? And then if you wanted to, you could add some leaves in there. Okay. So then if we lay it flat, we can start adding our little characters. Now I am hot gluing them, so this is something that you may want to, want to add a little sort of piece of ribbon on the back of these so you can take them on or off. But so this is pretty permanent. Just make sure that's sticking. Make sure the leaves cover up a little bit of it. We'll put a black pussycat at the top there. Oh, I love the cat. And the eyes really set him off, don't they? We've got a pine cone, so maybe I'll pop a pine cone in there as well. You've just got to allow it to settle. And what you could do is just try these things out. Lay it flat on a desk somewhere and just try them out. See how you feel about everything before you commit. I love the ghosts. And now we've got the two there, we need to put one up there, don't we? Yeah, so just you could just hand sew on a little bit of ribbon or something, just so you're not putting the hot glue on. But quite honestly, they will peel off, and you can take the hot glue off. You can just peel it off, warm it up with a hairdryer, not too hot obviously, and then you can actually peel it off. So with this one, I just want a little bit of glue on the side there. I want to poke him there, so he sort of sits out a little bit. You can just see him peeking over. We've got the fabulous witches' hats, so I can pop that down here, I think. So again, a little bit of glue, pop that in there. So when the children see this on your door, they'll be looking for all the little characters, won't they? Oh, it's just gorgeous. Try not to catch your leaves with the glue. I'm not sure I want any more of the ghosts. I think 3 is enough. I've got another pussycat here, so I'm going to pop the pussycat down here with the pumpkins. I'm going to put another pumpkin, I think. Oh, I don't know. Maybe down, maybe So you don't need many, do you? You don't need many, especially with the leaves. Maybe, oh, I'm sorry, I'm flitting about all over the place now. Maybe he could go behind. Maybe I'll pop him behind. So I'm just putting the glue just on the edge there, and I'll have to lift this up and just pop him behind, and I'll hold him there. And you see him until he sets. It doesn't take too long with the hot glue. That's why using the hot glue is actually quite fun, because it's an instant gratification. And then we'll put another pine cone in there. And obviously you can build up, put on as much or as little as you want. Again, you need just to hold it in place. I really want to use another witch's hat. Maybe he should go up there somewhere. I've got lots of glue strings on me now. I don't know. I think I've got enough on here already. Maybe he can go in there though. Yeah. I don't like to waste anything, especially if I've spent a little while stitching them. So yeah, he can go in there. I like him in there. Yeah. So you start to sort of balance it up. I think 4 is too much, don't you? I think we've got enough with that. But with all these other spare leaves, you see, you can add more leaves in. Maybe there's a little space there for a leaf. So let's just pick out this lovely red one. And of course, all the time that I'm sticking these down, I am gluing these onto my original wreath that I put down. So then you kind of have to decide whether it is something that you want to pull apart at the end of the season. Yeah, it's a tough call really. So let's just add another one in there. Just pop it in behind that pine cone. There we go. I think I'm just about done. I'll just put another couple down here. And these are all layered up. They are obviously cut on a machine, and they're all layered up. So you have to sort of peel them apart. Oh, just terrific. Okay. So I think I'm finished. I could add more, I must admit. And you could add lights as well. So if we turn this around, there we go. We've just created that. Isn't that lovely? And don't the ghosts really stand out? I love them so much. And then don't forget to adjust the leaves. So you might want to not see all of them. You know what I mean? Just want to see them peeking out. I think that would be fun. And that will now hang on my front door. Well, maybe on the 1st of October. That would be plenty soon enough. So you could add a ribbon to do that. You could add bows. I think that would look amazing. So your project for September is the fabulous wreath, and it's called Oh So Spooky. I'd like to think that you'll make some, and I'd like to think that you'll make loads.